So this trip that you're about to see is a trip that I've been wanting to do for a couple of years now. Kind of we'll call it a memorial trip. When I took possession of the Land Cruiser after my dad passed away and got to work making it run and drive and bringing it back to life, a lot of what I thought of was the trips that I had gone on as a kid in that rig. A lot of the memories that I had from my youth going out and adventuring in it. And of course, as I thought about all those adventures, all the places that I had seen, the things I had done, all those great memories, the thoughts kept coming back of, I want to go back. I want to do it again. I want to see that again. I want to share that with my family, my loved ones, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of the places that I would go and adventure were places that I had been to in my youth with my dad on those trips. So of course the places that were close to my hometown here were easy to go and see. Afternoon drive, day drive, quick overnighter, that kind of thing. I was able to hit a lot of those and see a lot of those places again while exploring a lot of new places too. I remember seeing a post that a friend of mine put up on Instagram about how he had recently gone out to gun sight. And that immediately rang a bell with me. I remembered going out to gun sight with my dad out on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And I don't remember maybe that exact camp trip, what we did, how long we were there, a lot of those details. But I remember that name. I remember gun sight. And then that led me to Point Sublime, Crazy Jug, Jump Up Point, a lot of those other points out there on the Grand Canyon that we had been to several times, and the memories and the feelings associated with camping up there on some of those majestic points. Now, the routine was fairly common for a lot of these trips. We'd get up there and set up camp and enjoy dinner or whatever it might be, but we always had to make it out to the point for the sunset. And the reason? Well, my dad was a photographer. Of course, you got to be out there to catch that sunset in the evening. In fact, I remember one night, I remember one trip out there. We had set up camp a little bit off the rim and had gone out to the rim for the sunset, and it was going to be a magnificent sunset because of a storm that was rolling through. We went out, did the photography, watched the sun go down, and the storm rolled in, started pouring down, thunder, lightning, smashing out there. It was wild. And we rolled back into camp in the dark. And we had two dogs at the time. One was named Courage and one was named Patience. Some lessons that my mom was trying to teach us as kids. And we rolled in and saw Patience out there on the end of her chain. She was chained up there at camp, and did not see Courage. Didn't know where Courage went. And as the lights swung across camp, as we pulled in, we can see the chain leading into the door of the tent. And come to find out that Courage had gotten so wound up about that storm, decided to just tear his way into our tent and kind of made a mess of things in there. And so as I thought about those locations, those trips, those experiences, those adventures, I decided I want to go do it again. And I want to do it in the Land Cruiser. I wanted to try and interconnect as many points as I could on dirt roads, back roads, Forest Service roads, camp out there and just enjoy a full overland trip out to the North Rim. Well, the short version is, years passed and I never made it happen. Last year I got really close to going, and I was going to do it as an anniversary trip for my dad's birthday, but again, life just got in the way. I never made it happen. So when I saw another year slipping away with this trip not happening, I thought, what can I do to just make sure it happens? Just make it happen. And what I realized was if I involved someone else, that would make me commit, because I couldn't back out, you know, as easily if someone else is involved in the planning and kind of committed to going on this trip too. So that's how Nate got involved. Nate had invited me on a couple of overland trips in the past. He's an ambitious guy, and I get amped up every time I hear about these trips, but I often have a hard time finding the time to really spend and get in a good overland trip. I know that Nate is interested in the same stuff that I am, and so I thought I would just hit him up and say, hey, what would you think about doing a Grand Canyon trip? I kind of shared with him the points that I wanted to go see and just kind of a rough draft of what I thought the plan might be, and quickly realized that Nate has a talent in planning backcountry trips and routing them all out. I mean, it wasn't very long after I had presented the idea to him that he sent me a link to a route with the points that we could hit, the backcountry roads, the whole thing laid out, and I said, yes, that's awesome. And we set a date and we started planning for it. So I knew that the Land Cruiser was going to need a little bit of love before going on this trip. Not only for like comfort reasons, but mostly for roadworthiness reasons. So I knew that I was going to need to make sure that the Land Cruiser was ready and prepared for this trip. And so what you've seen in the previous episodes was me preparing for this trip, taking care of some of the issues, finding some new issues. And the main goal was that carburetor. I was really hoping that putting that carburetor, that Weber carburetor on it, would solve a lot of the problems that I have and just make the Land Cruiser run like a top for this upcoming trip. Oh, excuse me for a minute while I eat my dinner. Well, as you saw in those videos, I got pretty much everything wrapped up. The carburetor, even to this day, is still giving me issues. I finally took it into a shop so that somebody that knows more than me about carburetors could look at it and see if it's a me problem or if it's a carburetor problem. And I'm hoping I'll know soon what the final word is on that and what the final resolution will be to solve that problem. But it was good enough to go on the trip. And so just a few days before we were supposed to leave, I wrapped everything up. I made a mad dash to pack everything that I would need for the trip and hit the road. So you'll probably notice that on this trip I handled things a little bit different. Instead of narrating and updating you while I was on the trip, I did very little talking, very little narration, and honestly, kind of the bare minimum camera work that I could. The reason for that was I wanted to focus on the trip. It was an important trip for me. This was a trip that was special to me. I was excited to get out on it, and I just wanted to be able to be in the moment and not worry about the stresses of having to set up cameras, talk to the camera, make sure the shots were right, a lot of that stuff. I just wanted to be there and enjoy it, and I had the stress of getting ready leading up to it on top of that. So you'll actually see that the very first day I didn't film anything. I didn't even get the camera out on that first day. I did very last thing that first night, run out to the point and throw up a camera real quick with some rough settings to do kind of a night lapse, which I don't even think worked. I think I got the sunrise more than the night sky. I think I took a couple of photos of our camp that day, and then you see the very first hike that we get on day 2. So I apologize if things seem a little scattered or bumpy or intermittent. I don't know what the word would be if it's not a smooth, coordinated trip like what you're used to. This trip was about me and about my dad and about the memories and the experience of being out there, and I needed to make sure that I kept it that way. So I'm going to do my best to narrate along the way about what's going on, what's happening, and kind of share with you the schedule that we were on. And I'm also going to share with you a little bit of history of that Land Cruiser and how it came to be in my family's possession, but also into my possession. Some of the features that it has, some of the things that I've done to it since I've received it, a lot of that stuff. So it should be a good episode. And so with that being said, let's get this started. Get this episode put together and show you what we did while we were up there playing at the North Rim. So as I mentioned, day one was kind of a mad dash to get out of town. I had a church that morning that I needed to go to and some obligations there. And so I wasn't able to get home and kind of finish putting everything in the rig until that afternoon. One of the worst parts was there was a huge storm rolling in, which was another thing that we kept looking at was the weather. And I just thought, man, what is going on with this trip? Like, the Land Cruiser's having issues. I was having a hard time getting the carburetor smoothed out. And now I'm looking at the weather, and the weather looks like it's going to be an absolute disaster for while we're up there on that trip. So I was getting pretty anxious, getting kind of wound up, frustrated, stressed, fed up, all those emotions. But finally threw everything in, met up with Nate, and we headed out of town. And as we were headed out there, we kept kind of hitting rainstorms. Like, it never really poured, but it looked like it was going to be harsh. Our very first destination was Crazy Jug. Nate just mapped out some fantastic routes, trying to stay off of, not only stay off of paved roads, but stay off of like the main dirt roads, like trying to get to all the 2 tracks we possibly could, which was super cool. So we ended up getting out to Crazy Jug fairly late. When we pulled up, there was one car there, and they immediately got in and left. I don't know if a couple of ruffians pulling up kind of intimidated them or what happened there, but they immediately left. So we had the entire point to ourselves that evening and the next morning, which is just, it was fantastic. Really, really cool. So we set up camp and cooked ourselves dinner and just kind of hung out, chatted. It was just a great evening to kind of relax, ease into this trip, and enjoy being out there in the solitude and the quiet, away from work and all those other stresses. We spent the night, got up the next morning. I was able to run out, kind of catch this sunrise that you're seeing, and enjoy the views of the sun coming up, and again, just kind of easing into the emotions and the feelings and the experience of being there, which was great. We had breakfast, packed up, headed over to a trailhead that we planned to hike out to another point. I think that was going to be Monument Point, if I remember correctly. But we ran into a bit of a hiccup, and I think I explained that right here. All right, we just hiked out to this point out here, valley. I guess it's not really a point, out to this valley. It is a pretty view, but it was, what, probably just right around a mile, and the bugs were absolutely terrible. Felt like I was in Alaska fighting, or Nate said, where was it we were? With, up in the Northwest with mosquitoes. Just, they weren't mosquitoes, but they were thick, and had the mask up. If we hit them on the way back, I'll try and take a picture and see if we can capture it. Maybe I'll do a quick video. I don't know if you guys can see the volume of bugs. Oh, there you go. Get close and you kind of can. Oh my word, it is terrible right here in this spot. You get in the sun and it kind of goes away, but man, right through this path here, I don't know if it's the shade or the certain amount of ground or bushes or what, but I think I've eaten 3 or 4 bugs on this trip. Even with the mask on, they still figure out a way to get down in the gaps, and not fun. Nate's using his like a well,
a fly swatter.
I think I just got another one. Nate's using his like a horsetail. He says that's the method that works for him. Maybe that's what I need to do.
I haven't eaten one yet.
So yeah, I told Nate I've got my protein for the day, and he said maybe we'll just skip lunch if you've got what you need, and I might by the end of this hike. So we got here and we're kind of thinking it wasn't worth it. I mean, pretty view and a nice little wander in the morning, but just not sure that that was really super worth it. The original plan was to go out to a point that I think would have had much better views, but even though we showed it wasn't in the park boundaries, the sign said that it was, and that dogs were not allowed. And so we've got our 2 dogs and we weren't going to leave them back in the rig. So we found this hike that looked a little more, looked like it was out of those boundaries and where we could take the dogs. So that's what we chose. So we did, but not sure that we'd necessarily recommend anybody else to come and do. So anyways, we're probably going to turn around and head back and see what else we can find as we continue along. So granted, the alternate hike was not the greatest hike. It was still cool, and it was good to get out and hike and let the dogs go for a run and all that stuff. I honestly think we probably wouldn't have had an issue if we would have taken the dogs on that short little hike that we were going on, but we want to abide by the rules, and we want to follow the guidelines and do things the right way. So it worked out okay. So we got back to the rigs, loaded up, and headed off again to our next destination. And the beauty about it was we just took our time. We just kind of meandered along through the mountain. It was spectacular. Just beautiful scenery, epic roads to drive. Just loved it. So we ended up stopping at Fence Point, which was another kind of remote point up there on the North Rim. It was a great view. We ended up having lunch there, and we had that viewpoint to ourselves. We did have one gentleman that kind of showed up real quick, asked us a few questions about where we were going. He was out there camping, doing his own thing too, which was cool. So it was fun to kind of chat and visit with him. But for the most part, had the place to ourselves again. Just enjoyed being up there and that viewpoint. And then following that, we got back in our rigs and we headed towards our second night camp, which was going to be out towards Fire Point.